Again, here's the comprehensive strategic management model. And you'll notice where the external audit or Chapter 3 fits into the model. It's situated evenly across from the internal audit, focus of Chapter 4. And that's because both of these audits are equally important functions to perform before moving forward in the strategic management process. That is, before considering of long-term objectives and strategy development. In this chapter, you'll analyze the tools used to conduct an external audit, also known as industry analysis. The external audit focuses on identifying trends external to the company that could impact the business environment in which the company operates and which would be seen as opportunities or threats the business need to confront or avoid. Chapter 3 presents framework for assessing and analyzing external forces. Think about this quote from Sun Tzu. Know your enemy and know yourself, and in 100 battles you'll never be defeated. When you are ignorant of the enemy but know yourself, your chances of winning or losing are equal. If ignorant of both these, the enemy and yourself, you are sure to be defeated in every battle. This statement is true in war as it is in business, sports, or anything else I can think of. Preparation is always the key to success. I am reminded of another great quote by Abraham Lincoln. I will prepare, and someday my chance will come. The learning objectives for this chapter describe how to perform an external audit, discuss external forces that affect organizations, describe key sources of external information, discuss forecasting tools used in SM, explain how to develop an EFE matrix, explain how to develop a competitive profile matrix, and discuss the importance of gathering competitive intelligence. The purpose of an external audit, boiling it down to its simplest form, the external audit is conducted to develop a finite or reasonable list of opportunities and threats. Developing the list helps strategists to identify key factors that could benefit or threaten the firm. They aren't yet developing the strategies, but identify the key factors will be considered in the organization's strategy. The opportunities and threats considered at this point are just reasonable. The steps to performing an external audit. First, it's important to gather competitive intelligence and information about key trends. There are obviously many sources for information like trade journals, newspapers, internet sources, salespeople, vendors, and many others. Next, the second and third steps involve assimilation and evaluation. This is generally done with a meeting or a series of meetings with as many as managers as possible. Again, the purpose of with as many managers as possible is to gain a broad sense of input and buy-in throughout the company. Where the extensive discussion of meetings might focus on which are the key external factors and how they represent actionable opportunities and threats. Ultimately, this group of managers compiles a list of key external factors which could be opportunities or threats. These factors should be 4 things. 1. Important to achieving objectives because remember that strategies will be built on these factors. 2. They should be measurable. Thirdly, they should be applicable to competing firms. 4th, hierarchical so that from the company can build a cascading goal system applicable to functional or divisional levels. This graph demonstrates the relationship between the key external forces and the organization. Again, the key external forces are those things which the organization has no control. Each of those forces can have an impact on each of the many facets of the business or the aspects of the business can control. This interplay effectively creates the opportunities and threats of the business. The text does a better job than I'll do of discussing the myriad of economic forces. The purpose of this slide, though, is to just reinforce that point. But there are many economic forces to be considered, and the impact of those forces are far-reaching. Consider McDonald's as an example. McDonald's is amidst an extremely hot 5-year stretch. It's for the same reason that many discount retailers are booming. In tough economic times marked by high unemployment and low GDP growth, demand for value is high, while demand for many luxury goods is low. This is just one example. Another could be the reversal of the U.S. trade deficit. When the value of the dollar is down compared to foreign currencies, demand for U.S. goods is high in the world marketplace, both domestically and abroad, because foreign goods made comparably are more expensive. One thing that's fairly unique to each industry is a reliance on technology. Think of two different companies like Verizon and Starbucks. One has technology as its product, one as a support function only. Either way, both companies are fairly reliant on technology forces. Social, cultural, demographic, and natural environment forces. A few examples of the multitude of these things to consider. Table 3.5 on page 67 of the text provides a better list of social, cultural, demographic, and natural economic variables. But these are just a few of the examples. A critically important part of external audit is identifying rival companies and assessing their strengths. This analysis affords you the ability to know how you'd fare, good or bad, in a head-to-head competition. Remember the Sun Tzu quote? Know your enemy and know yourself, and in 100 battles you'll never be defeated. Political, governmental, and legal forces. Think about the forces that the government exerts business every day through acts of government regulation like antitrust legislation, setting of tax rates, lobbying activities or patent laws, or protectional policies carried out and enforced by the EPA, or taking equity stakes in companies, for example. For businesses that rely on the government to do or not do any of these activities, a political forecast can be a very important part of the external audit process. My company, in fact, has employees and consultants tasked as government liaisons to be in tune with the flow of the political tide. Competitive intelligence is gathered by many companies. It's defined as a systematic and ethical process for gathering and analyzing information about the competition's activities and general business trends to further a business's own goals. The objectives of competitive intelligence are to provide a general understanding of industry and competitors, identify areas where competitors are vulnerable and assess impact of actions on competitors, and identify potential moves that a competitor might make. The sources of info must be publicly available as a rule of thumb. Sources include trade journals, want ads, newspaper articles, government filings, customers, suppliers, distributors, competitors, and the internet. There are obviously many sources, but remember, as a rule of thumb, they should be publicly available, and unethical practices must be avoided. Again, just a list of some of the sources of competitive intelligence. Porter's 5 Forces model of competition. Michael Porter is a noted professor at Harvard. He is the leading authority on company strategy, and his work is recognized in many governments, corporations, and academic circles globally. He is the author of many books and articles on competitive strategy and competitive advantage. Michael Porter's core field is competition and company strategy. He is generally recognized as the father of the modern strategy field, and his ideas are taught at virtually every business school around the world. His work has also redefined thinking about competitiveness, environmental policy, and the role of corporations in society. Porter's 5 Forces analysis is a framework for industry analysis and business strategy development. It draws upon industrial organization economics, or IO, economics to derive 5 forces that determine the competitive intensity and therefore attractiveness of a market. Attractiveness in this context refers to the overall industry profitability. An unattractive industry is one in which the combination of these 5 forces act to drive down overall profitability. A very unattractive industry would be one approaching pure competition in which available profits for all firms are driven to normal profit. Porter's 5 forces include 3 forces from horizontal competition: threat of a substitute product, threat of established rivals, and threat of new entrants. And 2 forces from vertical competition, the bargaining power of supplier and the bargaining power of customers. 3 of the 5 forces refer to competition from external sources, while the remainder are internal threats. A change in any of these forces normally requires a business to reassess the marketplace, give the overall change in industry information. Firms are able to apply their core competencies, business model, or network to achieve a profit above the industry average. A clear example of this is the airline industry. As an industry, profitability is low, and yet individual companies, by applying unique business models, have been able to return in excess of the industry average. Forecasting is another tool to identify key opportunities and threats. Forecasts are educated assumptions about future trends and events. They include quantitative techniques, which are most appropriate when historical data is available and there is constant relationship, or qualitative techniques when historical relationships are less stable. Examples of forecasts include demographics, employment, and economic data. Other internally focused forecasts would also include revenue and profit or business metrics or market share. Assumptions may be used, and assumptions are estimates of future events based on the best information available in the present. Firms that have the best information generally make the best assumptions, which usually lead to a competitive advantage. The External Factor Evaluation Matrix, or EFE Matrix, is a numerically based evaluation which allows strategists to summarize and evaluate external forces. We're going to take a look at how to develop an EFE matrix. A key to remember in developing an EFE matrix is that the key external factors have been developed by a team or a group of managers from within the corporation, and so therefore has a broad base. The steps in developing an EFE matrix are to list those external factors, to weigh them from 0 to 1, to rate the effectiveness of current strategies, and to multiply that weight by the rating. Finally, the score is the sum of the weighted scores calculated within that matrix. On the next slide, we're going to take a look at exactly how that looks. The next analytical tool introduced in Chapter 3 is the competitor profile matrix. It identifies the firm's major competitors and their strengths and weaknesses in relation to a sample firm's strategic positions. The critical success factors include internal and external issues, and the rating scale is slightly different from the external factor evaluation, as it considers the major and minor strengths and weaknesses. Again, here you can see a simplified competitive profile matrix that is completed. The critical success factors are listed along with their weights and the ratings, and some of the weighted scores of each of the 3 competitors listed. You can see that competitor 1 has a weighted score of 3.15. Competitor 2 has a score of 2.6. And the third company has a score of 2.7. Most important success factors are advertising and global expansion with a weight of 0.2 each, while the least important success factor is market share at 0.05 with a rating of 3.15 out of 4. Company 1 is the strongest.